Hey TechKnowStuds! Another thing that your operating system does is prepares the device to be written to. Now some devices come already formatted and you don't need to do any kind of formatting on it. However, some devices you need to format in order to make it accessible to your operating system. And what it's doing is it's setting up things like a file allocation table so that way it can utilize the disk. So in this lesson, let's get into what formatting looks like. Your storage device usually has some sort of table that's as a reference that's used to reference the different files on that drive. So that way there's different addresses and we can look up where that file exists. Now it would kind of defeat the purpose of having this table spread all over the disk and different parts of the disk. And so really what we want to do is we want to set aside some space on the disk that this table exists. So that way we can go to that and take a look at where our different files reside on the disk. But the way the table is formed and how the information is stored inside these clusters varies a little bit. And so it varies depending on what kind of device you have. It varies depending on what kind of operating system you have. So there are different file system types. And one thing we've already mentioned is like a file allocation table. Well, that is one file system types, and there's been various different versions of this. But there are a lot of other file system types that are out there. Each one of these file systems has a little different approach in how they implement this technology. For instance, NTFS, or New Technology File System, is the file system that Microsoft Windows systems use. And so it has a master file table, or MFT, that it implements instead of a file allocation table. But essentially, it has a lot of the same components as a file allocation table. We can see a little bit of info on the master file table by using one of our sysinternal tools. So I'm going to open up sysinternals and I'm going to scroll down to the NTFS info 64. So NTFS info 64 is right here. Although this is a command line tool. So what I actually need to do is open up a command line. And it does require administration rights. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the start. I'm going to open up the command window here, but instead of just opening up by hitting enter, I'm going to have to right click and say run as administrator, and then I have escalated privileges, so I can run things with escalated privileges. And then what I want to do is I want to get into the directory, the sysinternals directory. So I'm going to get into the sysinternals directory here by doing a change directory and then the path. I'll hit enter. And now I'm in that path right there. And I'm going to do the NTFS info 64 and hit enter. And it does require some parameters here. So the one that is required is this drive letter. So I'm going to do the drive letter of C and hit enter. And it shows me information about the formatting of this device. And one of them is this master file table down here. This is the MFT info. And as we can see here, the MFT size is 199 bytes. We can see the cluster that it starts at and the range of cluster right there. So we get some information about the MFT info. And the ones that are outlined here are mainly disk file systems, things like your hard disk drive. Optical disks are a little different. So some of the formats for optical disks are things like ISO and UDF. And then if you're talking about things like tape drives, that's a different format yet. Ultimately, there's a lot of different file system types that are out there. And these, what you see right here, are actually different categories of file systems. How you format your different hard disk drives and your other devices largely depends on what operating system that you're using. So for instance, if you're using Microsoft Windows, then you're probably using something like New Technology File System, or NTFS. If you're using Linux, then maybe you're using the fourth extended file system, or ext4. If you're using Mac OS, then perhaps you're using the Apple File System, or APFS. So most likely, if you're using one of these systems, this is what you're using for those systems. Since each one of those systems has a different preference on what you use, if you have some media that needs to be switched between these different devices, these different operating systems, then that's when you go to something like File Allocation Table, or FAT. I'm on my demo laptop here, and I'm going to open up File Explorer. Within File Explorer, I'm actually going to select this PC, and I can see my different drives or volumes. I'm going to select this volume right here, or this drive right here, right-click on it, and I am going to go down to Format. And then we can see we could actually format this drive. This is preparing it with whatever file system that we want to put on here. So as an example here, maybe the file system I set up right now is FAT32. That's the default for this type of device. And maybe I want to switch it to NTFS or exFAT. So I would select the one that I want to switch it to. I would select the allocation unit size. So this is how big those clusters are. So right now it's 4096. But as you can see, I can set it for something different. And I would set it for something different. If I'm going to have lots of little small files, I probably want a smaller cluster size. But maybe I'm storing lots of huge files, then maybe I'm going to have a bigger cluster size. So that's how I would choose it within here. And then I would give it some sort of name and then click Start to do the formatting. So this is how you would format or prepare a device that needs to be prepared. So a lot of times I'll do this when I put a new device into a computer. One of the first things that I'll do is format that drive.